gonna tell you something. I'm Star-Lord. You ready for one last ride?
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is written and directed by James Gunn, the director of the previous two films and The Suicide Squad. Still mourning the loss of Gamora, Peter Quill must rally his team to defend the universe one last time and protect one of their own. But if the mission is unsuccessful, it could very well mean the end of the Guardians. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy films. The first movie is what made me the die-hard Marvel fan I am today. And this may be an extremely hot take, but in my opinion, Volume 2 was even better with how it expanded the first movie's world and characters, while flawlessly setting up the future of the MCU and carrying over the strengths of the original. Those two films were what made James Gunn become one of my favorite directors working today. And so far, James Gunn hasn't made a single comic book movie or TV show that I've disliked. I thought Peacemaker was really fun, and The Suicide Squad has quickly become an all-time favorite of mine. So even though the recent MCU content has been a mixed bag recently, I was still extremely excited to see how Gunn would continue the story of these characters. Especially after the holiday special last year proved he still got when it comes to making Guardians of the Galaxy content. And thankfully, James Gunn did not disappoint with this one. I genuinely don't think I could have asked for a better ending to this trilogy than what he delivered with this film. As most of the trailers have hinted at, this film does take on a darker tone than the first two films. Unlike the other Guardians movies, this one feels very somber and even disturbing at times, as we get to see the impact Endgame had on this team and Rocket's origins, which are really hard to watch at points. Right off the bat, I feel like that element of the film in particular is going to divide audiences, since this new tone is a bit of a drastic departure from the tone of the other movies, which were more fast-paced and comedic. Personally, I appreciate the dark tone. I feel like it was the right way to go considering this is supposed to be the final Guardians film. It definitely helps make the stakes feel higher and give this finale more emotional weight. To me, the Guardians of the Galaxy films have always had a great mix of comedy and drama, so even though I can see this part of the film turning some people off, I thought it worked extremely well for this movie. But even with the dark tone, the film does have a lot of comedic moments and jokes, and surprisingly, they found the perfect balance between the two tones. It never feels like this movie is prioritizing its comedy or messing with its more serious narrative by making jokes, even if it's at an inappropriate moment. The comedic timing allowed this film to keep the comedy that worked so well in the previous Guardians movies intact, while balancing out the darker parts of its narrative. A sharp contrast from the last couple of Marvel films that felt like they were making too many jokes, to the point where their humor became obnoxious and ruined the film's tone. The tone and execution of the story also gives this film some of the highest stakes in any MCU movie. I think the last comic book movie I've seen where it felt like all the characters were in danger or could die at any moment was, ironically, The Suicide Squad. The danger and ticking clock threat is established early on, and the overall conclusive nature the film is going for really helps raise the tension during most of the action and character scenes. As mentioned, the humor is also great. I was laughing hysterically at a few points. Gunn implemented his signature style of humor and continues to do wonders for this trilogy. Gunn also has a very strong direction in this film. There are never moments in the film where it felt like there was studio interference of any kind that took place behind the scenes, and Gunn was able to have a complete vision present in the movie, giving it the personality and heart his films are known for. I think this film earned every emotional moment. While there can be an overabundance of characters, they all get their fair amount of screen time and development, and I thought those scenes were very strong, especially the flashbacks with Rocket, which showed off James Gunn's early horror roots, and they are so agonizing to see play out. I can guarantee that if you love these characters, you are going to be on the brink of tears at least once or twice in this film. There are also some fantastic examples of world building in the story. We get to see a lot of new planets and worlds throughout the film, and not only do they feel like natural inclusions in the world of this franchise, but some are cleverly tied back to the events of previous Guardians films. And thankfully, even with everything going on, the film is completely standalone and character-focused. Instead of setting up 5 movies and 14 TV shows in the vast MCU like some of their recent projects have, allowing for the script to never come across as unfocused or the pacing to feel messy. And I don't think I need to say the soundtrack is absolute perfection. Every song fits their respective scene so perfectly, and some even have a good amount of thematic relevance, similar to the songs used in Volume 2. I think it should be obvious at this point that every time James Gunn is brought on to direct a movie, it should be a confirmation that the soundtrack is going to be fire. This is also the first Marvel film in a long time where the visuals looked phenomenal from beginning to end. The CGI doesn't look like it was rushed or cheaply made. Everything is extremely convincing while having a fully realized vision behind it, and it makes every action scene or animated character stand out and feel like they belong in the world this movie presents. And like many of Gunn's other works, there is also a great balance between the CGI and practical effects, and they never failed to impress me with how detailed and intricate they looked. The set design is also beautiful. Every location is more distinct than the last, and there was an endless amount of creativity on display every time the Guardians traveled to a different planet. There are also so many action sequences that are pure eye candy to look at. The editing is mostly sharp, the pacing was great, the stunt work is crazy, they are brutal, fun, and triumphant, and the cinematography and lighting were astonishingly impressive. There's one action sequence in a hallway with all the Guardians during the final battle of this movie that I think is an all-timer for the MCU. There were a few moments where the editing felt off during the first few action sequences with a ton of quick cuts, but that thankfully went away as the movie went on. As usual, the cast of this film brought their all to remind us why these characters became so beloved to begin with, and their chemistry is also so strong in this film. Chris Pratt is awesome once again as Peter, and with how much his character goes through in this film, I have no problem calling this one of the best performances I've ever seen from him. And there are a few moments near the end of the film where he really gets to shine and let out all of his fears, dread, and frustrations in his character. Zoe Saldana is also a pure star as Gamora. This film presents a very different version of the character we all know, and she perfectly shows that through her performance. This film does such a phenomenal job following up on her story after Infinity War and Endgame, while showing how far gone she is from the Gamora we've come to love over the years, and the interactions with her and Peter are so heartbreaking to see play out. There's a strong theme of moving on and accepting permanent change with her character in this film, and I think they handled that part of the film beautifully. David Bautista as Drax continues to be one of my favorite characters in the entire MCU. Every interaction he has with the other characters is comedy gold, and he also handles his more dramatic scenes incredibly well. Pom Klementieff remains so charming and lovable as Mantis. I thought she was awesome in the holiday special from a few months ago, and she carried over the strengths of that performance in this film and continued having great chemistry with David Bautista in every scene they shared. Karen Gillan has always been amazing as Nebula in my opinion, but she might have been the best we've seen of her in this film. Since this is the first full-length Guardians movie where Nebula is a hero from the beginning, we get to see how she interacts with the Guardians, and she gets to show off her strong chemistry with the team. Sean Gunn doesn't have a lot of screen time, but he knocked it out of the park as Kraglin in this film. And shockingly, he gets one of the most emotionally powerful scenes in the entire film at the very end that made me want to cheer for him. Vin Diesel is Groot. Yeah, I think that sums it up. Groot is just being his hilarious, charming self in this movie while also having some cool new abilities, and like Kraglin, one of the best scenes at the end of the film. Bradley Cooper is also phenomenal in this movie. You can hear every small amount of pain in his voice during his performance, and the flashbacks with his character are flat out devastating and gut-wrenching to watch play out. And this is coming from someone who knows his comic book history and saw the events of his backstory coming. Every scene with Rocket in this film are as powerful as they are brutal, and Cooper's voice performance is truly stellar. Rocket has been my favorite member of the Guardians, so you can probably guess this movie was pretty hard for me to watch at points. Will Poulter does a great job as Adam Warlock. However, my biggest disappointment with his character and probably the film is that he doesn't play a huge role in the movie, which is pretty surprising after how nerve-inducing his setup was at the end of the last movie, and what an iconic character he is. But I can understand why he had such a small role, as the main villain this film focused on felt a lot more natural and better fit for this film's story. And at least they did have him in the film instead of completely ignoring that they set him up at all, and they did show a connection between him and said main villain. Speaking of which, my god, where should I even begin with the High Evolutionary? This guy is without doubt the best villain in the Guardians trilogy, and one of the top 3 best villains in the entire MCU. Hell, maybe even one of the best villains in any comic book movie I've ever seen. The High Evolutionary not only gets a horrific motivation for his unforgivable actions, but he is purely vicious. The actions he commits in this film are unspeakable, and he continues the trilogy's theme of messed up father figures, as he shows so much verbal and physical abuse towards Rocket with no remorse whatsoever. Unlike a couple of other villains with motivation in the MCU, you feel absolutely no sympathy for this guy, and you just want to see him get absolutely destroyed at the end. His actions are horrible. His goals are horrible. He's horrible. He's an irredeemable monster!
What took you so long, idiot?
Shikuji Iwuji also gives an above-phenomenal performance in the role, perfectly showcasing what a malicious, terrifying person his character is, while also adding a bit of that Saturday morning cartoon flair to him that makes him so entertaining to watch and easy to root against. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is far more than a satisfying conclusion to the MCU's best trilogy. It is the perfect send-off to the Guardians franchise thanks to James Gunn's strong direction and writing, jaw-dropping visuals, both CGI and practical, a lovable and extremely talented cast, exceptional villain, outstanding action sequences, awesome soundtrack, and a great use of humor and heart that made audiences fall in love with these characters to begin with. This is easily my personal favorite post-Endgame MCU movie, and the best film to come out of this franchise since No Way Home. Maybe even Endgame. As to where I'd rank this with the other Guardians films, I'd say it's not as strong as Volume 2, but I would say it's better than the holiday special and the first movie. Now that the Guardians have had their send-off, I think things in the MCU are going to be a lot harder moving forward, now that their best and most consistent franchise is done. I think this franchise needs to have a streak of great content to get back to its glory days. But I'm more than happy that this film was able to live up to my expectations and give these characters the final installment they deserve. Similar to Endgame, this felt like the end of an era for the cinematic universe, especially since James Gunn and the actors involved with this have claimed they're also moving on from these movies after this film. But even if the MCU has a long way to go before it gets out of this mixed bag of content they've been producing recently, I think this film is a good sign that the DC universe is in great hands. And I've got a good feeling about Superman Legacy. Oh, and just as a side note, I'd highly recommend staying for the post-credit scene for this film, because if somehow the entire film didn't make you tear up even slightly, I think this scene will definitely hit home for a lot of people. I won't spoil what it is, but it might be one of the best moments of fan service in any comic book film in the past 4 years. And it felt so earned after everything that happened in this franchise. At this point, all I could say is, James, keep up the good work. I'm going to give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 a 9 out of 10. So those are my thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Feel free to leave your own thoughts on the film in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you like this review and you want to see more, be sure to support the channel by hitting that subscribe button, liking the video, and ringing that notification bell to be notified for any upcoming reviews.
We'll all fly away together into the forever and beautiful sky.